Hey everyone, welcome back to our video swing through Georgia. I'm Chris White with the American Battlefield Trust. We have Gary Edelman behind the camera. He'll soon be on with us. We have Kyle Carlson, better known as Carlson, who I'll introduce here in a little bit later on, and Chris Welton, one of our board members who lives here in Georgia. And we want to thank you for watching this video. We want to encourage you to check out our video swing from a few years ago where we came through Georgia. We visited all kinds of places, including where we're standing today here at the Kennesaw Mountain battlefield. We've seen other places like Rocky Face Ridge. We go all around Atlanta, so check those out. We'll put a link down in the description for you. And we hope that you'll click like and subscribe on this video as well. Just to bring everyone up to speed before I bring on our park ranger and expert here at Kennesaw, Kyle, I want to bring us back to from the 50,000 foot view of this campaign down to about the 500 foot view. So as we all know, this campaign starts off in early May of 1864. It's going to pit William Tecumseh Sherman, the hated Sherman here in Georgia, versus Joseph Eggleston Johnston with the Confederacy. We have these two opposing commanders, but we have a number of different armies that we're going to play with here in Georgia. But for a moment, let's step up to Virginia. In Virginia, Ulysses S. Grant, the commander of all Union forces, is undertaking a campaign towards Robert E. Lee. That'll be Lee's vaunted Army of Northern Virginia versus Ulysses S. Grant and George Gordon Meade in the Army of the Potomac. Check out our Overland series and you can learn more about this series of battles. How this plays into our overarching story is that Ulysses S. Grant tells his right-hand man Sherman, hey, I want you to apply pressure in Georgia, not necessarily take Atlanta, which will eventually happen, giving away the story, but I need to make sure that you don't allow Joe Johnston and other Confederate forces to come up from Georgia and reinforce the principal army of the South, and that's Robert E. Lee's. At the same time, we'll send a few other armies into different places like Bermuda 100, down the Red River, and we're going to try to apply pressure at all points on the Confederacy, including the Shenandoah Valley as well. So what we're going to see here in Georgia, we're going to start off in northwest Georgia. We'll go from Chattanooga, which was seized by the Federals before Chickamauga, held on to with Missionary Ridge and Lookout Mountain in November. And now in December of 1863, we have a new commander in the Western Confederacy, Joe Johnston. Johnston has about 64,000-ish men, we're going to say, at the outset of the campaign, versus 110,000 Federals in three different armies. What Sherman wants to do, move into northwest Georgia and then start utilizing the Army of the Cumberland, commanded by George Thomas, his largest army. He's going to be the guy who's always doing something like this. Hey, look over here. While John Schofield's Army of the Ohio, a small army of about 9,700 men, and James Birdsey McPherson, there's no fear in McPherson, moving down with the Army of the Tennessee, trying to move south and around Joe Johnston's left flank all the time until they reach a place called the Chattahoochee River, when he'll eventually go around the Confederate right flank. The idea is to keep the Confederates off balance, use a campaign of maneuver to get to where we are, and not going to go for headlong assaults like we're going to see taking place up in northern Virginia. So this is what's going to play out at places like Rocky Face Ridge. We'll move down to a battlefield at Resaca. We'll have assaults, but again, the Confederates will put up a good defensive line, but they're outmarched and outflanked. And slowly but surely, Joe Johnston's going to keep falling back towards Atlanta. Atlanta in 1850 was a town of about 2,500-ish people, about the size of Gettysburg. By 1860, there's about 8,000 people here. By 1864, there's more than 20,000 people in the Atlanta area because of the war industry and because of refugees coming in from the countryside here due to the war. But what is bringing the armies down to this area? One is going to be the railroads. There are 4 railroads coming in and out of Atlanta. The most important during this campaign will be the Western and Atlantic Railroad that is going to run from Chattanooga through Tunnel Hill, check out that video, and head down 138 miles towards Atlanta. Both sides will be using this railroad. That's something to keep in mind. Confederates are shipping up supplies while Sherman's shipping down supplies. This is going to be key. Logistics are key during the American Civil War. If you have to break away from the Western and Atlantic Railroad, that means you're going to have to live off the countryside. And while Georgia hasn't felt the hard hand of war like some of the other states yet, and it's going to, we are going to have to try to supply these two opposing armies using one rail line at this point, or the Georgia countryside. So that's what we're looking at. Now, we have William T. Sherman, he's moved his way down across Rocky Face Ridge. He has gone down towards Resaca. He keeps moving his way down towards places like Dallas, New Hope Church, Gilgal Church, Pine Mountain. And slowly but surely over these speed bumps, here comes William T. Sherman's army, always outflanking and outmaneuvering Joe Johnston's army as he gets closer to Atlanta and the Chattahoochee River. Eventually, Johnston will arrive in this area. We're standing on Pigeon Hill, and I'm going to bring on Kyle here in just a moment to orient us to the ground, and he will put up a defensive line. The Confederate Army, about 60-ish thousand men at this point, along a very impressive line known as the Kennesaw Line, over some mountains, over some very impressive hills, and this will be probably the strongest defensive position that Joe Johnston has since he's fallen back from Rocky Face Ridge in early May. So now we're into June of 1864. We're getting ever closer to Atlanta, and this is the big battle that most people know about with Atlanta. There's the fall of Atlanta, the Battle of Atlanta, and of course Kennesaw Mountain. So I'm going to bring on Kyle Carlson, better known as Carlson to all of us, to get us oriented. Kyle, can you tell us more about this campaign, get us oriented to the ground, and talk about where we're standing?
Certainly. So the armies are going to start here around June 19th. That's when the Confederates are going to leave their lines at Gilgal and Gilgal Church and make their way here. They've already started, the engineers have already started to build the lines. The army itself will be here on the 19th of June. We're going to have here at Pigeon Hill about 1.5 miles, 2 miles to my left. We're going to have Big Kennesaw, the summit, and then about another half mile down is going to be the reason why the armies are here, which is the Western Atlantic Railroad. If that's not here, Kennesaw Mountain's probably bypassed. If we go to our right, probably about 2 miles as the crow flies, we're getting to Cheatham Hill. And then after that, another 3 miles or so, we get to Kolb Farmhouse, which will actually be the first major action here at Kennesaw Mountain on June 22nd, so a few days after. Kennesaw is kind of a mini Dallas New Hope Church area where they're going to try and swing away from the railroad. They're still connected to it, still got their supplies. They're not fully disconnected like at New Hope Church in Dallas, but they're going to try and swing and flank once again the Confederate Army. But John Bell Hood is told to come out, kind of does a John Bell Hood, as I call it, and just goes, and that makes Sherman realize there's no outflanking. He will say that flanking is all played out. So he's going to devise a plan a few days after that, and it's going to have 4 prongs to it. We're going to have initial diversionary attack where the visitor center is today. We're going to have another diversionary attack a little bit further than Kolb Farmhouse, which strangely enough will be the only success here. Cheatham Hill is going to have about 9,000 troops that launch an assault, and then where we are standing right here at Pigeon Hill, or back then called the Kennesaw Spur, we're going to have about 5,500 Union troops, 3 brigades, launching an assault on these impressive rocky hill here. It's not going to end up very well. So battle will last about 2 hours here at Kennesaw Mountain. Cheatham Hill, as we know, we can check out our previous videos. They're going to stay there overnight for the next couple nights. Here, the Union troops will actually just fall right back. That success, the only success that I mentioned about, is going to be called a place called Ollie's Creek, and they are going to actually be able to outflank, and now the Union Army is starting to shift all their troops back, somehow 360 this, all the way to the southern portion of the battlefield. And Johnston's going to catch wind of this. The Union Army is now closer to Chattahoochee River and Atlanta than Johnston. So on the night of July 1st, Johnston will leave the Confederate lines, and the next morning, Union troops hear nothing. They creep ever so closely to the Confederate lines and find nothing is here.
Thanks, Kyle. So we have a lot, feel free to stick on with me.
Yep.
So we have a lot of different moving parts that are taking place down here. So we have the June 22nd action, which is at Kolb's Farm. So essentially that's fighting Joe Hooker, Mr. F.J. Hooker, as Robert E. Lee likes to call him. He comes out to that farm area. John Bell Hood pulls a John Bell Hood, who Robert E. Lee says is more lion than fox. So that kind of means he's just going to pounce rather than be a little bit more sneaky. He comes out, meets 40-ish Federal cannons. He comes to ground. Things don't go well for John Bell Hood. So now we're stuck here for a few days. We're looking at these impressive rocky face, not ridge, but mountains that are down here at Kennesaw. And now we have to come up with a new plan. If we can't maneuver around it, William T. Sherman is going to have to go through it. And he gets a lot of guff for this, right? Kyle, like, you know, he's maneuvered, wants to avoid that pitched battle that we're seeing up in Northern Virginia. But now, because William T. Sherman's William T. Sherman, he gets guff for anything he does. He outmaneuvers Joe Johnston. That's not good enough. Now he's going to try to go through him, and it's not going to go well.
Yeah, and I mean, in the grand scheme of things, he gets a lot of gruff for launching the frontal assault here, but it's not a huge frontal assault. He's only putting 15,000 troops, about 5,500 here and about 9,000 at Cheatham Hill on top of those diversionary attacks. He's not committing a full army or anything. It's almost like a heavy assault probe just to hope if he can break through. Burnt Hickory is a perfect road to go right through Marietta down to Georgia. If he breaks through at Cheatham Hill, he got Dallas Highway. Once again, takes you to Marietta and then straight to Georgia. So he's thinking about where to assault, but he's not putting everything out. He wants to keep Johnston on his toes with all this flanking, and now all of a sudden, oh, I got to think about frontal assaults now.
Yeah, and Sherman, to put this in perspective, he's utilizing his 3 armies. He has Schofield, who's down here on the right. We have Thomas's army, his largest, which is kind of in the center-ish. And then we have the Army of the Tennessee. Things are kind of split up a little bit. We'll put a map on there. And he's going to utilize Thomas's, the largest army that he has under him, to go and try to break through at Cheatham Hill.
Yep.
Not called that at the time. It's named after Benjamin Franklin Cheatham, whenever his Confederate troops hold that hill. And that doesn't go well, and as Kyle pointed out, we made a video there. Then we're going to try to use the Army of the Tennessee, which is his old army. This is Sherman's old army, and we're going to send Morgan Smith's division up towards where we're standing. They're going to take into action Charles Walcutt, who is a direct cousin of Davy Crockett, the hero of the Alamo. And then he's also going to be bringing in Missourians who will be coming through here. We'll have Joe Lightburn's brigade and some others. They'll be taking on Frank Cockrell's Missourians. But I think what's important is we look at this campaign on both sides. Number one, Sherman, as he's moving down here, is losing men for 2 reasons. Number one, it's a campaign, so we have casualties, killed, wounded, missing, captured. But he also is extending that rail line from Chattanooga down towards Atlanta, and he has to protect his spine, and he needs at least 130 rail cars a day to keep this army supplied. So he has to divert more men there. So we're weakening the forces as we get closer to Atlanta, and this is what Joe Johnston likes. Joe Johnston's also pulling in some forces as this campaign goes on. He gets Leonidas Polks, depending on how you want to pronounce his first name. We get a lot of guff for that. Into this army. He'll bring in some others, but I think what's important is we stand atop Pigeon Hill. We're going to have Missouri Union soldiers versus Missouri Confederates, so you get that brother versus brother, if you will, cousin versus cousin. But at the base of this hill, when the Federals start to attack, they'll sweep up the 63rd Georgia. And as the Civil War goes on, I want you to think about the regimental numbers. That'll be how they're designated coming out. So you have the 1st Pennsylvania through more than 200th Pennsylvania regiments. And they're numbered as they come into the war. So the higher the number, that means the later in the war they're going to join up. And a lot of times that corresponds with the quality of the fighting men. Not that they're not trained, but they might not have seen the elephant, might not have seen battle. So the 63rd Georgia, at the base of this hill, and this is an imposing hill at Pigeon Hill, which one of the names Pigeon Hill also comes from, which I read, was that pigeons used to land here as they migrated.
One of them that I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ones. They're going to be swept up, and then the Federals will meet that Cockrell's brigade, that famed Missouri brigade, those veterans, yep. And then we will see them being thrown back in this sector. So we're seeing those probing attacks, almost like a large reconnaissance in force. If he could break through, it'll be great. But he's not sending the whole army. He's making
Correct.
sure that he's, like you're trying to say, he's not going for broke and trying to go all the way up Big Kennesaw. Mm-hmm. He's hitting these other, what he perceives as weaker points, or at least strategic points.
Yeah, and just to add for the fighting here, it doesn't help that there's going to be a little gorge off to our left over here. And so it's almost natural for troops to just go path of least resistance. So instead of going up the hill, they're just going to kind of go right up this middle. So now they're going to take fire from their left and their right. And even artillery is going to be able to rake down there as well. So again, not a good time to be here at all.
Yeah, it's a good point as we wrap up here that Kyle's making. We'll put the map. They're coming into salient points. There are inverted salients and exterior salients pointing outward. So what you're seeing is a zigzag line of fortifications, and as the Federals come up here, the Confederates have both engineered a man-made line, but are also utilizing the natural topography.
Yep.
So these are creating both natural and man-made kill zones that these Federals are marching up into. Like Cockrell's brigade is pointed outwards, while the next brigade to their right is actually more inverted. It's almost like coming into a V, so it'll come into a kill zone that way. You'll have troops from William Wing Loring and Samuel French's divisions and others up in this area. And these are a lot of veterans that these Federals are taking on, and they're veterans on the other side as well. So Kyle, to wrap up the fight at Kennesaw, and then to talk about what you guys have coming up for the 160, and if you want to come down here, and we encourage you to visit the park. Can we wrap up the fighting here? What happens next after June 27th? Fighting doesn't go well here for Sherman. What do we do next?
So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have that flanking movement that forces Johnston to leave this place on July 1st into the 2nd. The last natural barrier now for Atlanta is the Chattahoochee River. Confederates will put up I don't even want to say a strong resistance. They'll put up a resistance for Chattahoochee River. They have some amazing earthworks there that Johnston just neglects and doesn't use properly. Claiborne, the only one that actually realizes how those work. Really enjoy Claiborne. He'll just give up Chattahoochee River, the last natural barrier, without a fight. And then once that happens, then it's really only a matter of time for Atlanta. No natural barriers. Now Johnston's going to get relieved of command, and then we'll have the battles of Petrie Creek, Atlanta, just successive battle after battle. And these are going to be like those Eastern Theater battles of Spotsylvania and Wilderness, where just the entire armies are fighting and just major casualties on both sides.
Yeah, we have external factors that are taking place for the Confederates. That is William T. Sherman trying to impose his will on his enemy. We have internal factors taking place as well, and that is Joe Johnston does not enjoy the confidence that Robert E. Lee has of Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. At one point, Joe Johnston is writing back to Jefferson Davis, and Davis is writing back to him, "I'm disappointed." He's going to say that back to him about how he is conducting this campaign. Meantime, there's the John Bell Hood element who is writing letters back to Jefferson Davis, giving him a behind-the-scenes look, behind his commander's look. This is usurping that chain of command, jumping that chain of command. So Joe Johnston's fighting external and internal forces. I do not think Joe Johnston is a fantastic general like some people have made him out to be, but I also think that he's in a very bad situation coming down here. Should he have attacked Sherman? We could question that. Hood thinks that he should have, and we see Hood go on. And then, should he have done some other things? It's a tough situation. He's outnumbered more than 2-1, supply chain issues. Now he has to defend Atlanta, and he's taking on 3 federal armies coming towards him. And Kyle, to wrap up, what do we have to offer down here at Kennesaw? I know we have 160 items that our visitors can come down or our viewers can watch, but what else could you offer throughout the year?
We give every weekend, due to staffing, it's only the weekends, we do battlefield walks, so walks here at Pigeon Hill, Cheatham Hill. Every other day, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we'll give museum tours here at the Visitor Center. Those are our normal standard operating events. Feel free to go to mps.gov/KEMO, and we'll have our schedules on there, or check out our Facebook, probably a little bit easier.
Yeah, and that's fantastic to check that out, and be sure to check out their Facebook page, check out their social media channels, and please check out ours as well if you haven't, with the American Battlefield Trust. And I want to introduce Chris Welton. He's one of our trustees or board members at the American Battlefield Trust and a local down here, and does a lot of work for us here in the Atlanta area. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's great to be out here, and thank you guys for the work you do, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all our viewers, and particularly our members, and especially our color bearer members. We couldn't do any of this without all of your help. I did want to share also some encouragement for those of you who live in the Atlanta area or in the state of Georgia to take advantage of this great resource we have. Whether it's to come out here and learn a little bit about the history of the place, or whether it's just recreation, it really is a fabulous resource. I'll tell you that my first experience with Kennesaw Mountain was when I was 8 years old. I was a Cub Scout, and they brought us out here on a Saturday morning to do a 20-mile hike. Now, think about that. If somebody tried to do that today, they'd be in jail. But we all made it, we all had a great time, and we all became very enamored with this place. So thanks for letting me point that out. I also want to say, we did not, I don't think, point out Lost Mountain, which is over my left shoulder here. My first question when I saw that a long time ago was, how in the heck did they lose that mountain? It's pretty impressive. But I did want to point that out. So thanks again to everybody, and thanks for watching, and thanks for our staff and the park staff for shooting this video so you can all enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you to the National Park Service for having us. Thank you to the Georgia Battlefields Association for supporting this video. Thank you to the Friends of Kennesaw Mountain. We have a lot of friends groups down here, so we really appreciate all the support. Some of you are helping with boots on the ground efforts, others with funding video trips just like this.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.